If you've ever seen this glowing yellow ring and had a phosphorus or Munkia wipe your team from the face of the earth, then you know Hyper is incredibly powerful. Mastering this core mechanic of Illuvium will help you win more games than you ever thought possible. It is also the only way to stand a chance at higher levels of play and win the big prize pools that could seriously change your life. Now, in this video, I will cover the 3 core aspects of Hyper: how Hyper works and everything you need to know, the best way to prevent your opponent from using Hyper against you, and the best way to abuse Hyper to win more games yourself. Now, what is Hyper? At its core, Hyper is a relationship between the different affinities in Illuvium. The 5 affinities are water, fire, earth, nature, and air, and then the fire nation attached. But every affinity beats 2 others and is weakened by 2 others, as you can see on this chart. For example, fire has a major advantage over nature and a minor advantage over air. Similarly, water has a major advantage over earth and minor advantage over fire. Every single alluvial within a large radius on the board in Illuvium will increase or reduce this modifier. You can check this radius and the alluvials included by going to the Hyper tab in-game and then hovering over any alluvial. In this case, we will analyze Lura in this position, which has 2 arrows up, signifying that we are getting positive Hyper at this time. Being Earth, Lura gets +2 from fire alluvials, +1 from nature, -2 from water, and -1 from air. We can already see that the opponent has no water alluvials, which makes earth alluvials naturally quite effective. To make things easy, Lura encompasses every opposing alluvial in its radius. It gets +2 from Tiru, Chukul, Rai, and of course the Ranger with fire daggers, and it gets a -1 from Revo, Kukulus, Gazotep, and Mjol. This ends up with a total of +4, indicated by the 2 golden arrows. This total number positively or negatively will change the rate at which alluvials gain Hyper, as trying to hit maximum Hyper gives powerful benefits to each alluvial. For alluvials with a composite affinity, it only takes their dominant affinity into consideration, which is the same as its stage 1 alluvial. For example, a Scoriox will be fire dominant and a Jotun will be air dominant because of Fiery and Mjol. The confusing thing about Hyper is the way it benefits each alluvial is different. Just like before, only the dominant class of an alluvial counts here. So a Scoriox, although being Arcanite, being a combination of Fighter and Scion, will only gain bonuses based on Scion because that is what Fiery is. Also, every Hyper bonus has 2 elements: a scaling bonus that increases as they gain Hyper, and an extra bonus for after they've maxed out their Hyper bar and gain that glowing yellow ring we have all grown to both love and fear. Before we jump into the classes, I should quickly talk to you about a project that has just started their $3 million airdrop. Here is what you need to know. Anyone who knows me knows that I love the ETH Lizards and Lizard Labs, but what you might not know is they have evolved far beyond just an NFT project. They are now a gaming DAO that is building infrastructure, handing out alpha, and my personal favorite, allowing any individual to invest into new gaming projects on the ground floor. Jump into their Discord today to learn about the future of crypto gaming, as their token launch is right around the corner. And thanks again to Lizard Labs for sponsoring this video. The fighters gain scaling attack speed up to 50%, and as a bonus, they get extra 50% attack speed and 60% physical and energy piercing when they've maxed out the bar. The Bulldogs get scaling damage reduction up to 20% and an extra 20% when they've maxed out the bar, as well as 400 max health. Rogues gain scaling crit amplification up to 50% and an extra 50% crit amp when it's maxed, along with a 10% health execute. Now, crit amp basically just increases the amount of damage you do with critical hits, which rogues already love. Scions gain scaling Omega power up to 100, essentially doubling the amount they do with their Omegas. They get an extra 100 Omega power when the bar is maxed, and a 15% energy refund on Omega when it's maxed. Lastly, Empaths gain scaling heal up to 30 a second to everyone near the alluvial, and as a bonus, they get an extra 30 heal per second and 40% bonus healing efficiency. Now that we know how Hyper works, we could talk a little bit about the strategy behind it. To prevent Hyper, you want to mostly focus on general team composition. If a team is made up of 2 affinities right next to each other on the chart, then you would be extremely weak to a specific affinity. For example, if you use all earth and fire alluvials, water alluvials will gain hyper extremely fast, and defeating an opposing Axodon will become very, very difficult. If you see your opponent is playing a lot of water alluvials on the board, then it might be wise to swap in an air core for that given match, or in Gauntlet trying for 3 air alluvials. However, this is worthless unless the alluvials are useful. Rhoda and Mjol would be your focus in this case because they can do serious damage with hyper, given Rogue and Fighter are decent hyper classes, but your new air core being comprised of 3 tier 0 alluvials like a Grocko, a Volante, and a Tipo will simply be less effective. Now, when it comes to using hyper to your advantage, the main component of this is positioning. For example, in this scenario, I have a whole host of fire alluvials against my opponent who is using a Revo. Although it's a little difficult because Revo likes to move around the board quite a bit, I can maximize hyper by distracting his team and placing my entire fire composition where Revo will teleport at the start of the battle, keeping any negative hyper alluvials away from my fire and keeping all of my fire right up next to Revo. I can keep one bulwark at the front and put Flish and even Singe at the back to get a quick hyper boost and help later on in the game. Now, if there is anything I missed, please drop a comment down below, subscribe for the best beginner tutorials in all of crypto gaming. Don't forget to use my referral on the Illuvidex and check out this beginner's guide to Gauntlet next so you don't miss out on core knowledge before Illuvium takes over the competitive scene.